After e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. Now black plays f5. So we're looking at the Rousseau Gambit. And white goes on with d3. So that's what we're looking at in this video. We go on with knight f6. We've seen something similar in the past. Knight f6 is the move now. And now castle. So as mentioned in the previous video, we now have to play bishop b4. And what to do now? We're going to look at these two moves which we haven't looked at before. So this is very important because these are two very popular moves and we have to know how to play against them. c3 or a3 to challenge the bishop. So after c3, we take the pawn in e4. And obviously now playing pawn takes bishop in b4 means that you're going to be able to capture the knight. And this is actually better for the black player, as mentioned in one of the previous videos, by the way. So here we're going to look at this variation when white simply recaptures the pawn in e4. And now there is a threat, an actual threat on our bishop. Okay, bishop back to c5. And now two moves that are thematic, and we're going to look at both of them and see exactly how to deal against them. One of them is Rook E1, obviously. The other one is b4. And white has an idea of simply expanding on the queen side. So b4, let's start with Rook A1. E1. So what's the move now? The move is this one, a5. That indicates a thing that is very important. The thing is that white's good move, b4 is a good move, right? It's one of the best moves. And you want to stop that from happening because that does give white some tempos, some expansion on the queen side. Also because white does mean to play on the queen side as well, considering that the king is castle on the king side. So a5 is a very good move for black to stop that from happening so that the bishop doesn't get to be kicked out from c5. Two moves now, either bishop e3 or bishop g5. We'll see how to deal with both of them. Bishop to g5 is not a problem. You go on with d6. The idea obviously is to develop the bishop to g4, pin it, and then we're gonna play rook f8 because we're never gonna be able to castle. Usually you castle long side, on you don't castle at all. So knight to d2 now development, and now h6. Here's one of the many things you can remember, you can take away with you when you watch these videos of the Rousseau Gambit, is that after h6, the bishop going back can be attacked immediately because, as mentioned, the rook here and the king are not going to castle, also because you're unable to. So that means something very simple. You're going to play rook f8, push the pawns, just swap them. The bishop is going to go to pin the knight in g4, the queen is going to go to f6. So it's good for you to attack the bishop h6, g5, because in case the bishop takes you, you can develop the queen. In case not, push the pawns because you want to play g4 at some point and you don't have to worry about castling. So after the only move, bishop to g3, queen e7 developing, and after h3 giving space for the bishop and also stopping g4 from happening. Black plays rook to f8, that had to happen. After bishop to h2, queen to g7. These moves are all inevitable. We're planning to play h5, g4, but g4 can happen already. Nothing here stops the black's plan. We are gonna inevitably going to destroy and dismantle the pawns in front of the king side of our opponent. Even after knight to f1, maybe joining the defense. Still g4. Now you're threatening to take in h3, so even, pawn takes, doesn't matter. This is just like to indicate how to continue. Bishop to g4. The white player is playing only computer's moves now in order to try and defend in a faulty variation. Knight to g3. And now castle long. Our opponent can never really play b4 to open the files. Let's look at this move now. Knight to f5, attacking the queen. We take that knight, too powerful. Pawn takes back, we don't have the bishop pair anymore. So what to do now? The thing is, we're going to play d5. This is very important just to stop bishop e6. That would have been annoying. d5, bishop moves, and now knight to e4, capitalizing on this square f2. If rook to f1 to defend it, still rook to f5, we're completely winning. We're gonna double up the rooks and you have fun here. You got all the ideas of the world. So let's make a recap. Okay, f5, d3, knight f6, castle, bishop b4, and now they're attacking us with c3. Okay, take the pawn, pawn takes back, bishop to c5. And we're looking at the variation with rook to e1. Okay, a5 now. So remember, if they don't play b4, play a5 so to stop b4. And after the variation with bishop g5, here we play d6. Knight develops, and now h6. What happens if the bishop takes our knight? Okay, that's good. We go up the bishop pair, we develop the queen, and now there are no moves, right? Knight b3 doesn't do anything. You're still gonna play the knight back, the bishop back. Then you're gonna play rook f8. The bishop is going to g4 to put a lot of pressure on this knight. So this knight is actually better in d2 because it's protecting this knight more. Otherwise, we could just play bishop to g4 and then just swap everything here when we have 3 pieces aligned attacking f3. If not, let's look at these 2 variations. One of them with h3, the other one with knight to f1, and a thematic move knight g3, knight f5. Okay, bishop to g4 happens now. So if white doesn't play h3 in this variation, remember you always need to play this move where you pin the knight and then play rook f8 and just capitalize on this knight. Knight to g3. Rook to f8. Now we got many attackers over that square. And what happens after the very boring and annoying move bishop to e2, where now the white player is defending that knight very well. Okay, h5. Remember, this knight has to go from there because as soon as he does, we're going to have a lot of attack over the square f2. So we're planning to play h4, h3, potentially, we'll see. After h3, black goes back to d7, keeping the bishop pair, and we have achieved one of the things we wanted, which is basically more empty squares around the king. This pawn is pinned, which means this knight is now weak. After bishop d7 now, white, let's say white, well, okay, our plan is to play queen to g6, attacking this knight, threatening to take it for free. So the knight can't take this pawn because then queen to g6 simply wins the knight. The knight is trapped, can't move anywhere, g3 is not safe. What happens after knight to d2? Allowing the defense of the knight with the light square diagonal attacking pieces, the bishop and the queen. Well, rook takes f2, game over. And in this position, what happens after g4 instead of knight d2? Protecting. This doesn't change much, you can just sacrifice the bishop. And it's completely winning, obviously. Let's look at another scenario now by making a recap. Okay, castle, bishop b4, c3, take the pawn. And in previous video, I think I did show already what to do if white takes the bishop, which is not good. So take the pawn back, and now bishop c5 is forced. The variation with rook to e1 is met with a5. And now, earlier we went through bishop g5 and everything that happens next. What happens after bishop to e3? This variation is kind of boring, so you just have to take rook takes back, obviously. And now queen to e7, normal development of the pieces. Because of the swap, you see that the bishop in c5, you didn't really want to go back to b6 because then white is going to swap and you take back with the c pawn and it's a really bad pawn structure. You don't want to go back to a7 because the bishop will take you in a7 and then you can take back with the rook, but that rook there looks a bit silly. And you don't want to go back to e7 because then white is just developing better. So you have to take. So this is the most boring variation. What happens after knight to a3? The idea of playing, these are all best moves by white. The idea to play knight b5, the threat on c7, this is dangerous. Black now plays the best move, which is a grandmaster type of move, knight to b8. Obviously, the idea is to be able to play c6, d6, and stop any arrival of the minor pieces of the white player. So after knight to b5, black now plays knight to a6, stopping knight going to c7. Obviously, we couldn't play c6 attacking the knight because knight to d6 is terrible to meet. So knight a6, and now still best move by white, b4, d6. This is important. You don't want to take this supposedly free pawn because then rook b1 is kind of annoying. It's very good development by white. d6 is the best move. Also because you do want to play c6 at some point and get the knight away from there. Best move by white is rook to d3 because if we do play c6, the knight can... you might argue that the knight would have had access to this square anyway, but you're planning to play maybe bishop g4, maybe rook to d8, and then play c6. But now rook to d3 really just puts so much pressure and also threatens a sacrifice, potentially. It's not like the best move maybe, but it's absolutely playable. Rook takes, pawn takes, knight takes is interesting. Something that I would play if I were drunk. Best move by white is king to f8 as a matter of fact. And now best move by white is knight to g5. And now black plays h6. Best move knight f7, rook to h7. Only move. The knight is basically trapped, but white's development and compensation is there. The position is literally evaluated 0-0-0 right now. That means that in this position, if you have played against Stockfish for 17 moves, this will be the position that you will have reached. Black is threatening to play the G pawn somewhere up so that the rook is doubling the attack on the knight. It should be a better endgame for black. I'd take black in this position, but it's not that easy. So in this position, let's see what happens with normal development of pieces like queen to f3. Here, feel free to take the pawn in b4 because take, and then knight takes. This is not a poisoned pawn. The knight's about to become really strong and has the possibility to play bishop g4. It's a very strong move, so even let's say if after rook to d2, protecting the rook from the knight, then bishop to g4. And when the queen moves g5, we should be able to win some material and play a better endgame. And there's nothing here. If white will play knight takes pawn, winning a pawn basically, while pawn takes and then knight takes back, it looks like there could be some compensation. Our king looks unsafe and everything, but then rook to d8, you're doing just fine. So in this position, we see what happens when the queen tries to develop and the knight is still trapped. So what's white's best move? It's pawn to f4. Obviously putting more attack over the square e5 in the hope to find a way to get this knight out. Okay, black develops the bishop with an attack on this bishop, so after bishop takes, queen takes back. White's best move is knight goes back to d6. So you see how basically even white playing the absolute best moves, the white player will have to give up the piece. There is some compensation. So you're going to take the knight, and then after rook advances, attacks the queen, queen to e7. And once again, white's best move is pawn take, and then queen takes. And there's an attack on the, well, there's pressure on the rook, there's an attack on the knight will have to move. There's also an attack on b4, so the pawn can't support the knight. So after queen d3 developing and preparing maybe rook f1, normal moves, the queen defending the knight. This doesn't really work because knight b4 is now possible. It comes with an attack on the queen. The pawn can't take back because of queen takes rook. So if instead the queen goes to e2 to defend the knight and also to still defend, a little bit more the square e4, which is still pointless. Black takes the pawn in b4. Threaten to take the pawn in c3 as well, so after pawn takes back, you can win the rook for free. And if instead rook to c1 comes to protect the pawn, then pawn takes, rook takes. Knight couldn't take because of the attack on this rook in d6. Black plays knight to c5, and black capitalizes the advantage. We're going to be able to play g6 at some point and get the rook to play. The king will find a shelter in g7. It looks scary as a position, but position evaluated almost -4 or something like that. There's nothing here, okay? Obviously, queen to c2, for example, to put more attack over the knight, exploiting the fact that we can't play b6. You simply take the pawn in e4, as if nothing was happening. Rook check. Remember that in this variation, the white player had to give us a piece. So that was a strong attack, but he ended with nothing. Rook takes back, queen check, and on knight to e8, you're just fine. You're actually completely winning. So let's move on to the next line. And now c3. So we take the pawn and pawn takes back, bishop c5. So what happens after rook e1? What happens after white plays b4 immediately? Okay, here we didn't have a chance to play a5 soon enough to stop that from happening. So what to do after b4? Obviously bishop to b6, and after a4 threatening a5 winning the bishop, we play a6. White's best move would be knight to g5, doing some sort of fried river attack, also because we can't really do the variation of d5 here because the game is opened up. White can just take the pawn here, it's a disaster. So how to respond? We have to play queen to e7, and after knight f7, the thematic rook f8. Oh, and don't be scared by bishop to f7 check, because this is annoying. Bishop f7 check. Let me show you this first. King goes to f8, and after the bishop goes back to b3, black simply plays d6, careless of this move where you must have realized that the white player can win the rook. Knight f7, obviously attacking the rook. Rook to g8, knight back to g5, and here white's threatening to take, not to win the rook, but to win the exchange, or a perpetual, because we don't want to move back to h8, and we also cannot play bishop e6 because of the double attack. So what we do now is the surprising move h6. We give up the exchange. Bishop takes, obviously because knight retreating means we could have saved the rook, and we're doing just fine. A king takes, and now the knight is under attack, so he's got to move. So we're down the exchange, but we're actually fine because we have the bishop pair. So now bishop e6, this diagonal is ours now instead of being the white's player. And after a5 attacking the bishop, best move. These are all best moves by white now that are happening in this variation. Bishop backwards, and after now knight to a3. We'll look at this idea because we haven't looked at anything like this so far. The idea is to play b5. b5 is really annoying, but in this variation it doesn't work. First of all, this pawn is free. You don't have to worry about taking it because remember, when you have this pawn chain against the Italian, Rook E1 isn't a problem. There's no compensation, no sacrifice or anything like that. b5 here is not a problem. Take the pawn in a5. You don't have to worry about any discovered attack of this knight and the rook on the knight. If pawn takes back, then knight b3 simply wins the game. Because you see, what is white going to do now? If white just moves the rook from the attack of the knight, and knight to c3. Forking these two, you're winning material. If instead white takes our pawn first with an attack on the rook, rook to b8, attacking the rook. Best move by white will be knight to b5, attacking this bishop. Black's best move now is bishop takes in f2. It's kind of the only thing left to do because we're about to recover material. Rook takes back, and now knight takes the rook in a1. And here there's nothing. Rook a2 with an idea of going to a8 doesn't work because we have a very strong bishop. Queen a4 with the idea of going here and attacking the knight also doesn't work, simply because knight takes rook. And black is up the exchange. If queen goes down here to a8, just play queen to d8, right? You got nothing to worry. Right, so in this position, let's see what happens after knight to f7 instead of bishop to f7. f5, d3, knight, castle, bishop e4, c3. Okay, take the pawn, pawn takes back, bishop c5. And we're looking at the immediate b4 move. Bishop b6, a4, a6. And now knight to g5. Okay, as mentioned, we play queen e7. Earlier we went through bishop f7. What happens after knight f7 attacking the rook? Obviously you play rook f8. This is actually good for black. I mean, not that good, but there's nothing here for white. a5 attacks the bishop, bishop moves back. These are all best moves. And after knight goes back to g5 because you got double attack here, so you're threatening to take to win some material. h6 kicks the knight away. Knight to f3, and now we capture this pawn, which is not poisoned. So after bishop to e3, best move by white. The idea obviously is that, you know, this bishop is just too powerful. Black is planning to play normal moves, d6, bishop g4, and so on. Okay, we have to swap this bishop for reasons that I mentioned before. And after pawn takes back, we have produced an isolated pawn on the opponent. Oh, now d6. And there's nothing here. Queen to d3 allows the development of this knight without the c3 pawn falling. Develops the queen, prevents the pinning of the knight, and so on. However, black plays bishop to f5. This could have come even after queen c2, same thing. Bishop f5. And there's nothing here. Black is just, it's better. Not too much, but it's better. A move like knight to d2 developing simply loses to knight g3. You're attacking the rook, attacking the queen, the bishop is defended, so that cannot happen. So after queen goes back to e2, potentially play like move like bishop to d3. Okay, the bishop goes back to h7, the bishop to d3 to try and get rid of our incredible knight. Long castle. So after queen to c2, doubling the attack on this knight, what are we going to do? Are we going to give up that knight? No, d5. We protect it more. Taking with the bishop means you can take with the bishop, and the opponent's chain is safeguarded. And we're playing with against the isolated pawn. And the idea of playing d4 at some point, not now, but at some point. Let's see what happens after normal developing move. Okay, fine, we take the knight in d2. So it's a bit surprising. Bishop cannot take our bishop because knight takes rook in f1. We win the exchange. Queen cannot take the knight because bishop takes, queen takes, and then this is a fork. And here, the knight also taking the knight means you're going to play rook f1 check. And after rook takes back, bishop takes, queen takes, d4. Black is completely winning. If white takes with this pawn, we got threats of taking this pawn. You got the knight, you got the queen. The rook is going to be in an open file. So position now is evaluated as if black was up a piece. When the pawn takes, for example, you can take back. You got the knight attacking b4. These two pawns are going to fall. You got a rook on an open file. Basically, you can do anything you want with this pawn. Either white pushes and then we have a passed pawn, or if he swaps, then you can just take. It's an excellent position to play. The last line I forgot to show before, I'm going to show it now and then we close this video. Bishop c4, f5, d3, knight f6, and then castle. Okay, bishop b4, c3. Okay, take, bishop c5. In the variation with rook to e1, we play a5, top b4. And now after bishop to g5, we play d6. And after knight's development, h6, attacking the bishop. Always feel free to attack that bishop and to push the pawn forward. In the variation where the bishop takes and queen takes back, earlier we went through the typical idea of knight f1, knight g3, knight f5. What happens if white plays the annoying move h3? This is annoying because it stops our plan of bishop g4. However, we now go on how with g5. So that's the plan. So the knight cannot be moved like from here because let's say knight h2, then simply bishop f2 check, you win quite a lot of material. If instead white's best move here will be b4, this is to open the files. Feel free to win the pawn, take, and then knight takes back. And after still best moves, bishop c6 check, c6, bishop b5 check, c6 blocking it. And now white's best move is a3 to get rid of our very strong knight. Best move is to move the knight back to a6. And after the bishop goes back to e2 to join the defense of the king, h5. See, we have a queen protecting g5, so h5, g4, these moves are coming, and that means that this is not a very good variation for the white player. And now you know how to punish it. Knight to b3, these are best moves, attacking the bishop, bishop simply back to b6, nothing to worry. And after rook to f1, because you're going to play g4, right? And after take, the knight will have to move, and then you're going to have bishop f2 attack. So white plays rook f1, but still black continues with g4. This is inevitable. Taking, game over, right? Position evaluated -11 or something like that. Whenever white player does, you're gonna play queen h4 and then checkmate. So here the best move is knight f to d2 according to the engine. And now black does something surprising, but not really that much surprising. Castling, it seems like you're giving up this open file, but you're just tripling the attack over f2, so you should be able to take that. You're threatening to take the pawn in h3 as well, so pawn takes back, and now you got the bishop coming here. It's a fantastic position. It's really up to you at this point. If pawn takes back, which is the best thing to do according to the engine, because the position is the game is over, you're gonna take this with check, and when the king moves, queen h4 will be checkmate, meaning that white will have to give up the rook. Queen takes back, check, king moves, and now pawn takes back, and when the bishop takes back, either way, I mean, you're just gonna play queen h4 check here, and you win more material. You're also threatening rook f6 and then rook h6. You win the way you want.